catch my breath. Thank you, Mary Jane, and thank you to our choir. That song tells the whole story, doesn't it? The story of our God who created everything in our world. A God who has held the oceans in his hand, who can number every grain of sand. A God who possesses all knowledge and all power. Yet also a God who, because of his love for us, chose to be born among us as a child to be adored, and who, as a man grown, willingly humbled himself to the grave in order to die for us. When we behold our God, what we see beyond the majesty of the throne is a God who doesn't behave like one would expect the proper ruler of the universe to behave. This God, our God, defies all expectations. Of all the days in the Christian calendar, Easter is the one that best serves to remind us to expect the unexpected. To look into the empty tomb with Mary and the disciples and experience with them the shock, fear, and confusion at what has occurred. It's always struck me that on all the Sundays of the year for folks who don't traditionally worship on a weekly basis, Easter, along with Christmas, are the most popular. And no judgment if you haven't been here in a while. I'm glad to see you. You see, we read a lot of stories from the Bible as we worship each week through the course of the year, some more historically based, others requiring more suspension of our empirical minds. But Easter and Christmas? Well, if you can handle the unexpected reality of God choosing to come down to earth in the form of a helpless baby boy born in an impoverished, unwed teenage parent family from a backwater town in Galilee in order to eventually die horrifically on a cross and be raised 3 days later to provide salvation for all of creation, then you can probably handle any other Sunday that we have here at this church. But I think that's the appeal of these two Sundays. If the unexpected events surrounding Easter and Christmas are true, if we can come to believe those stories, then it makes grasping the rest of the stories of our faith in the Bible all the easier, right? But that's the part about this whole Christmas, Easter miracle business that has me thinking a little bit differently this year. When it gets down to it, just how unexpected was Jesus' birth, really? How unexpected was his death and resurrection? Didn't God actually do exactly what God said God was going to do on both of those occasions? Didn't God do what was expected? Take Advent, for example, a season of the year where, ironically, it's all about expecting Christmas, where we prepare for Jesus' birth by reading a number of traditional scriptures that tell us both from the Old and New Testament exactly what to expect is going to happen on that Christmas night. Through the prophet Isaiah, God foretells that a child will be born to us, a son given to us, who will be God with us. We are to name him Emmanuel. He will come from the line of King David, born to a young woman, upon whom the Spirit of the Lord will rest, and who will establish the reign of God forever. And the angel who shows up to tell Mary that she's expecting is recorded as telling her the same thing. You will conceive and bear a child who will be God's son, and he will be given David's throne, and his kingdom will have no end. So is Jesus' birth really an unexpected event for people of the faith? Shouldn't we be expecting the expected on Christmas Eve? And then there's this whole resurrection business. Again, we have plenty of places in the Gospels that record Jesus literally telling his disciples and followers what to expect on Easter morning, though the exact wording varies a little from text to text. Take John's Gospel to start. Beginning with chapter 12, Jesus tells them what to expect when his disciples misunderstand why Mary of Bethany anoints him with a bottle of expensive perfume to prepare him for his burial, of course. He tells them again, after washing their feet and sharing that one of them will betray him, that he's going to his Father. And while he will not leave them orphaned, he is leaving them for a time. They won't see him for a time, but they will see him again. Now, I admit, John's a little obscure, but in Luke's Gospel, Jesus is unequivocally clear. The Son of Man will be handed over to Gentiles. He will be mocked and insulted and spat upon. after they have flogged him, they will kill him, and on the third day he will rise again. Mark has him telling them this very same message 3 times. And yet, when all the events he described come to pass as predicted, his arrest, his mock trial, his flogging, his death, and yes, even his resurrection exactly 3 days later, it appears that everyone present in the garden that day struggled more with accepting the expected turn of events than the unexpected. If we take a look at the scripture that Patty read this morning from John's Gospel, the one we read every Easter Sunday, not a single character, not even the angels or Jesus, seem to have expected how the turn of events around and the reactions to Jesus' resurrection would pan out. First, there's Mary, who's come to the garden expecting to arrive at the tomb and see it sealed. Yet when she arrives, the stone is rolled away. Rather than assuming that he has been lifted up, as expected, and before confirming whether or not Jesus' body is indeed still in the tomb, she runs to the disciples believing the unexpected has occurred, that his body has been stolen. Then Peter and the other disciple, who doesn't have a name but is very much loved by Jesus, who did not expect Mary to come back with the news and clearly question their source, take off running to confirm their worst expectations, that the body indeed has been stolen. John does make a note that the beloved disciple did believe after looking in and seeing the linen cloths, but still did not understand that Jesus had risen from the dead. So he leaves still expecting the unexpected has happened, that Jesus' body has been stolen rather than resurrected. And then Mary finally takes a look into the tomb, only to find it unexpectedly occupied by 2 angels, which she's too in shock to find shocking, or she's used to angelic expressions. Either way, the angels aren't expecting her to be crying. They ask her, what is all the fuss about? And they ask this because the angels know she's been told by Jesus that he would be resurrected. So why is she acting like something has gone terribly awry when what has been predicted has come to pass to the letter? Why are you crying? And Jesus is likewise confused. When he comes upon her, she doesn't even recognize him. So strong is her expectation that Jesus' body would be there, and so strong her assumption that it must be stolen, that she's unable to recognize her beloved teacher when he's standing face to face with her. He asks her the same question posed by the angels. Woman, why are you weeping? And whom is it that you are looking for? Because Jesus is expecting Mary to be looking for him, to be seeking him, because she was prepared. He had prepared her to expect him to rise again. So why is she crying, and why doesn't she know him? Well, perhaps it's because after living through the terror of what he had told them all to expect, his arrest, his trial, his death, even though that has all come to pass exactly as he had prepared them, they had never expected it to truly happen. Surely, surely, this can't come to pass. And so in her grief, in her sorrow, in her shock, and her fear, she has lost the faith to expect the rest of what he promised. Mary literally cannot behold the miracle of the resurrection right in front of her. That is until he calls her by name. In that moment, when she is reminded of who she is, whose she is, Mary comes to believe that what she was told to expect has actually come to pass, that all Jesus had taught them was true, and that the Son of God has conquered the grave and risen just as expected. So the story isn't over, as she thought. And there's more to come. He's risen, yes, but he still has to ascend. And though she would like to hold on to him just a little longer, she has to let him go. She has to let the disciples know she has seen the Lord. and so more running, as she goes off to be the very first to proclaim the miracle of Easter, the good news of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, expected and arrived. Now I imagine that some of us can resonate with Mary's experience. While Easter is a holiday where we put on our finest clothes, embrace our best behavior, and act as though all is right in the world, Christ is risen, after all. I know that for many of us, today might just be a pleasant, albeit brief interlude in an otherwise dark, disappointing, and fear-filled time in our lives. Jesus may be resurrected once again, but we are still stuck in some dead-end places. Places we've been for a while, and places we expect to be stuck in for a while longer. Whether it's rocky relationships, failed opportunities, medical crises, or any other host of challenges that face us in our human lives, the celebration of Easter, however glorious, doesn't erase these realities. But here's what Easter does do. Easter reminds us that God does the greatest work in the graveyards of our lives. And that whether we're expecting it or not, God is relentlessly at work, making a fool of all of our assumptions as to what's possible and what's not. Easter teaches us that we don't have to see or even consciously participate in the possibility of resurrection from the dead zones of our lives in order for God to lift us up from the ashes, for God to work a miracle of resurrection. But it does help. Our participation does help. And so does expecting our God to be at work in our lives and through our lives. Throughout this whole season of Lent, again, ironically, a season of preparing us to expect the expected, we've spent these 40 days learning what our mortal participation has to do with God's divine miracles. We've explored why it is that we love to learn about and experience the grand miracles God has done, miracles God has done, miracles His Son has done, and why we make it a point to show up to worship on the most miraculous and unbelievable days of the Christian year, even if we can't be here any other time. We've considered the cost of miracles, how love for us and desire for our good is at the heart of every miracle God performs. We've reminded ourselves of the role of prayer and faith in activating miracles of healing and health in our lives. Through this all, we've wrestled with the difficult to accept belief that we were made for this sort of miracle. That we were made by God for miracles, to experience miracles, to work miracles, to participate in miracles through our lives and the lives of others. God would have it no other way. God is surely capable of performing great and unexpected miracles on His own. But God chose, from the very beginnings of our creation, to always make us partners in fulfilling God's miraculous work. He did it through the patriarchs and matriarchs, through prophets and kings. God even did it through His Son. And He can and will work miracles through us. Our scriptures, the tradition of our church, and even your own very lives testify that we can expect this to come to be. So that's the message of this Easter day. Whether we are expecting God to be at work in the graveyards of our life or not, whether we're willing or even able to participate through our grief, sorrow, and fear, God indeed is at work to bring about resurrections in our lives, to grant us fresh starts, to initiate new beginnings, to grant us new life. Not because we earned it, not because we worked for it, but because we were made for a miracle. So I don't think today is a day to expect the unexpected, Easter-wise. You're on your own for April Fools. But today is a day when the expected has come to pass. Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
I invite you, Easter people, to rise and raise your voices with me, singing from our hymnal number 3.